Uh, yep. So I do have some question. Is there a way to nest navigation tabs in Bootstrap? So what do you want there? Are you on microphone? Looks like, yeah. So right now, I mean, these are the default tabs or default styling that we have. When you say nested, what do you mean by that nested? I mean, inside here, one more line of tabs in the content of home. So in the content, you can have another set of tabs, but I don't think that is a good design. I don't know why you need that, but probably, yeah. What probably? Of course, you can have. So for each tab, of course, you will be having associated content as well, or tab content, or tab pane, I think. And inside that, you can have another set of UL elements and then associated tabs. So that should work without any issue. Although I haven't tried, but I don't see any reason why it shouldn't work. So it should be of no problem. Another question is, can you overview of login? Can you explain me what you want here? Overview of login, what login?
Should we like authenticate the user and the owner, like the customer and owner?
You don't need authentication for the customer, but for honor, yes, of course.
So we need to use some kind of backend for that.
Of course, I mean, you will have entire backend. I mean, how you will get data? You will be using your database, right? You will need some sort of backend. You will go through backend as well.
Okay. But that's not due for the first module.
No, not for the first module, which is due on Friday. On the first module, which is due on Friday night, you have to just build your static pages, just put some dummy data. You don't have to write any JavaScript, nothing of that sort, just layouts, that's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Another question is, I have a question for the project. Does it have to function till 11th or just the pages and design? Well, when I say layout, that means just pages and design, that's it. Meaning HTML and CSS, that's it. I'm not even asking you for the JavaScript. But yeah, after that, so what is today? 9th. We'll be finishing JavaScript on probably 11th, or it may go to 12th, first half as well. And then, yep, after that we will start jQuery. So probably Monday and Tuesday, those 2 days, or Tuesday and Wednesday, those 2 days, we will be having a backend session. So I will announce more on that topic, but still there will be 2 classes entirely on backend. And of course, another question is, can we change it later? Yes, of course. I'm just asking you to build something so that I know that you are working. But of course, I mean, work it or make it proper. Otherwise, you will be required to change too many things later on. And now onwards, you don't have that much time, because after this submission, which is on 11th, your next submission would be around 18th for your backend, or maybe 20th on your backend. So I will shift the backend somewhere in between on weekend as well. I don't know as of now. Probably tomorrow I will let you know. And then of course in the meantime we will go through AngularJS, and then after the classes are ended, you will get one more week. So probably 27th will be your last submission. So again, next 2 weeks or will involve a lot of work in that one as well. Okay, so another question is, so 1 page per requirement? Yep, you can have 1 page per requirement, or you can also 1 page per view, I would say. I'm not sure about requirement, but yeah, 1 page per, or 1 view per requirement, that kind of thing. Or you can also combine all of them together in the same, just scroll down, then you can give me different things in the same page. It's all on to you, because when we'll be integrating this with the AngularJS, of course you will be using templates, and you may have to break out your HTML into different parts. So we will talk about that, but at least you will be having some structure, how to use the login or forms or show a table or list of reservations, different things. Can we change it later? Yes, so you can change it. Everything should be responsive. Yes, so at least try for desktop and tablet. If you can do it for mobile, awesome. Do it for that as well. But still, yeah, I would encourage you to go for the mobile as well, and then you have all the tools with you to test. At least in Chrome developer tools, I'm not saying to go and buy tools or devices right now. You can just test here and, yeah, of course, in the CDD and start the emulation. So of course, tablet and desktop are required. Your design should be responsive enough. For mobile, I mean, it's optional, but I would encourage you to do that. Another question is, how will you judge the aesthetics? Of course, I can run it in the browser, right? I will look in the code, so don't worry about that. You will be submitting me the source code, so I will go through everything. For example, the last project or last time I went through all of the 27 projects. I have a lot of time. So all of these 27 projects I went through last time, each one. And then of course, how will you judge the aesthetics? So as this, I will just go through. I mean, I'm not asking you to follow colors and everything should be awesome. No, I don't care about that. At least you should follow some best practices in your design, and of course your design should at least work on the devices and no messy things. Something like that. Okay, so let's talk about JavaScript, come back to it, and then discuss. Or let me give you the recap what we did yesterday. So we started with the object. Of course, we didn't cover a lot much yesterday, but though whatever we covered was important as far as understanding JavaScript. And today and tomorrow's class is another set of important classes that you should be attending, because we will cover a lot of things. So yesterday we went through objects. So we said, okay, what are objects and how they are similar to hash maps in Java, hash tables in C++ or C, and then associative arrays in PHP, and probably some more languages, similar things. So whenever you have some kind of key name or key value pairs, then collections containing key value pairs, and of course you can say something about objects in that case. So this is the way where you can initialize an object in case of JavaScript, and then you can put some properties and values, or in the same dot notation or this square notation, square bracket notation, you can reference the value again, something like this. Again, your object can have any type of value, any type of key as well. So even we saw yesterday that these keys can be string, number, boolean, even an objects. It can be anything, and the values can be anything as well, as far as they are JavaScript objects. So we went through all this. We talked about array as well. So again, this is how you declare or initialize array, not declare. Declare, you don't have to declare array. You just initialize array using this braces, the square braces, and then you can either use the indexes and then assign or set values into particular index, or I think the better way is to not to follow this and then to go through one of these functions. For example, push, which will always push at the end of the array, or something like unshift, which we will add the element at the start of the array, or any combination of other functions as well you can use. In that case, you don't have to worry about this issue with the length and remembering the index all of the time. What else? Then we talked about JSON, so how it is different from your normal JavaScript objects. So of course, there are 3 conditions. If your normal JavaScript object follows this 3 conditions, then it can be termed as JSON. So all the keys must be string, all strings must be double quoted, and possible values are just one of this. So string, number, array, true, false, null, or another JSON object. So only these values can be, of course, in the value. And then if that your object is something like that, then of course it's a JSON, and then you can transmit it over the network. There won't be any issue. If you want to validate your JSON, if you have written some JSON or JavaScript literal like this, and you want to check whether it's a proper JSON or not, following all the C values or something like that, of course you can go to JSON lint .com, just paste your text here, which is the JSON string, click validate, and you should be getting it something proper, or true or false, and then all the mistakes there that are there in that JSON. Or you can also use some sort of plugin in case of Sublime Text like Pretty JSON. Then another important thing that we talked about was the parsing of the JSON. So usually when you transmit your JSON onto the network, it goes into the string format because conversion to bits is easier, right? It's character set. So of course it goes in the string format. So of course this is not JSON object, this is JSON string. And then when you want to use it on the JavaScript, so you have to convert that into the JSON object or the JavaScript object. So for that you use the JSON object here, the capital JSON, which is a global object. In case of JavaScript, it is available on the window. So you can use that, use the method parse, and then pass your string or the JSON string that you may have received from the server. And then when you, if it is successful, you will be getting the object, the proper object, which you can play with, like dot notation. You can add some more properties, you can delete some properties, everything you can do once you have the JSON object. If you want to send it again on the network, then you have to stringify or convert that object into string, and for that you can use something like JSON.stringify, and as the name suggests, it will convert your JSON object into the JSON string, something like this, which you can send to the server or any kind of other network, or on the network I should say. So that's how your JSON parsing behaves. There is another way to do that, but don't go with this approach. Again, that's too slow, and again you are kind of subjecting your application towards cross-site scripting attacks. So let's talk about functions then. If you have any questions, let me know. So what are the functions in case of JavaScript? Of course, similar to all other languages, well, let's not talk about similarities here because they are very different from other languages, especially Java or C++. That's why the JavaScript is called the first-class function language, because here functions are classes, kind of classes, or using function you can define structure of the object. So that's why there is nothing above functions in case of JavaScript. So even if you have to define some sort of structure for an object, you have to define function for that, and that function can be used to create objects as well as calling as well, so multi-purpose things. And again, we will talk about this inheritance kind of thing, or how to create objects, probably day after tomorrow, but today we will just go through what are functions, basic things. So first thing, JavaScript functions do not have a return type. So of course you don't have to type whether this function should be returning void, number, string, boolean, don't care. JavaScript doesn't care about that one, so it's a free language. So of course it doesn't have return type, but still it can return anything, or it may not return anything. That depends entirely on the function definition. Next thing, JavaScript function can return multiple data type values even from the same function, because of course they are not restricted to a certain return type, so they can return anything. So something like, okay, I will talk about this. Let's see how functions are defined. So in case here we are just saying some function, another one, so it is not returning anything, right? Looks like it is not returning anything. Here you are saying, okay, return 2, and here you are saying return string. Of course there is no return type, so you can't say by just looking into that or just calling a function. If you don't know the structure of the function, then probably you won't be able to understand what it is returning just by its signature, because there is nothing that sort of indicator telling you what type of value it can return, unlike in case of Java or C++, where it has to have that return type. Here no one cares. Now again, for example, here what I'm saying is, well, some randomize, nothing else, and then I'm saying you return 2, otherwise you return some string. So the difference is the same function can return a number as well as string or an object, or it cannot return it can return nothing, so it's all fine. And of course your code won't break, because this is legal in JavaScript, so you can do all this kind of things. Another thing, well, I will just give you a demo for that. Let's copy paste. if you try to call this function, like some function, of course you can call something like this. I'm just trying to say, or I'm just trying to see if it doesn't return anything. Well, it looks like it is not returning anything. Do we have something? So let's run it. And then you will see undefined here. So this is the thing. Even if you think the function is not returning anything, it is returning undefined. That's how JavaScript functions are, or they do behave. But as long as you put return, then of course it will return whatever you are asking for, so, or what you have defined, so true. So that's why you see the true here. But if you don't even use return, then of course you are returning undefined kind of thing. And even if you use just return, then also the same thing. So yeah, a return statement without any expression after it, it will return undefined. We just saw with return, and it will return undefined. Or a function without return statement will also return undefined. We saw that one as well. Just change it, and then it will return undefined. So that's how JavaScript functions behave. What else? Another thing or interesting thing is your JavaScript objects, of course not JSON. I'm not talking about JSON anymore. I'm talking about the normal JavaScript objects, which can have any value, right? Any type of value. There is no restriction on JavaScript objects. The restrictions are only on the JSON. So of course, your JavaScript objects can have unnamed functions as properties. So something like, in this case, you have the object, you have one property which is having a string value, you're having another property, but here you are passing a reference to this anonymous function. So now your sum function kind of a function. So you can call some function property like this, assuming it's a function. Well, what assuming? It is a function here. So if you want to call this function, you can use the property name, and then you can say something like obj.somefunction, and since it is referring to a function, you can pass anything, and then of course it will be writing that properly. Now again, this sum function is a property on the object, but instead of assigning any other value, you have assigned a function to it, which is perfectly fine, because in case of JavaScript, the functions can be assigned to variables. So that's true. And again, in this case, you are talking about a property on the object, right? Now, this is also true. Even on the variable, you can assign an anonymous function to that variable, and then you can call this function via this variable by just passing something, or just making sure that you call something. So yep, you can do all these things, or this is the different way or different approach while defining a function. Usually you will see something like this as well. So for example, this is very simple. So something like this. So you have some, right, because you are typing something in. So this is some function, and then again you can declare in this fashion as well, where you are passing an anonymous function to a variable, and then this variable can accept function as well. So you can call it, because now it is referring to a function. So of course you can pass, or you can call it using this braces, and in this time we are saying, okay, pass some data or some text to it, and then you are just printing it. So yep, that can also be done. Any question regarding this? Another thing I would like to point out here is, you cannot put functions on the JSON objects, because functions cannot be serialized. So of course you cannot put functions on the JSON. It will just not ignore, it will throw some exception, parse exception, that kind of thing. So of course, but your objects can have anything actually. There is no restriction on the objects. So of course you can have it. And then you can put functions on that one. So now you can think this object guy, it's kind of behaving, okay, it does have some properties as well, and it does have some functions as well. So it is kind of a structure similar to classes that you have in Java or in C, where you have a container or some structure definition where you can put some member variables or some functions as well. So this is kind of started looking like that, because now you can put functions on the properties as well, and that kind of not mimics actually, this is how we will be taking care of how to put properties as well, how to define the structure, or how to define functions on those properties as well. So that's why objects are the basis of JavaScript inheritance, or for that matter anything. In case of JavaScript, even your object or your array data types, they are all defined as functions in JavaScript. We will talk about that. So this is how you can define your functions in various ways. Just this is a global function at this time, so of course you have not surrounded it with anything, so this is global. In this case, this is function defined on the object obj. Here you are saying your function is in the variable kind of thing. So again, different approaches, you can use all of them. One important thing regarding this global variables, well, they are not just lying in the global space. They are ultimately, or I should say, there is nothing global in case of JavaScript, just like we have in case of Java or any other language, because even if you don't tie anything, so for example, I have one variable with the value 100. Now this myvar, actually it is available on the window object. So whenever you define something global, it gets attached to the window object as a property. So if you want to see actually, well, you can do. So I will just log the window object here. Window object is available to the entire window, of course this tab, and then you can see it will have all the global functions for the timings, for a lot of other things as well. So there is nothing beyond window object in browsers. So you can check all the functions that you have, for example, different things, parse int, set timeout, set interval, all different kind of functions as well. So they are all available on this window object, and even your myvar will be somewhere there in between, because you have defined something like this. Here, so you see myvar here. So yep, that's how even your variables are defined as a property on the window. Of course, you don't have to call window.myvar all the times, because JavaScript will resolve the myvar if it doesn't find, but it will find on the window in this case. So that's possible. It's the same thing as you would do something like this. So yep, so even in this case, if you define some sort of function and assign it to variable, actually you are assigning this function onto the global object, which is window. So what is the difference between these two? So we have one function definition kind of this, which is kind of global, right? So we can have something like this, and then in another case we are defining a function like this. So here what we are doing, we have created a variable, and then we are assigning an anonymous function to that variable. So in this, these two are different set of codes, okay? And one will give you an error, other will not. So in what case it will give you an error. So if you try to call the function before the definition like this, or before defining your function, if you call your function, then of course it will be an error, because okay, I will give you the reasons, but probably then in the next few slides you will get the reason for this one as well. But here there will be no issue. I mean, you can easily call it if you have defined it as the global function like this. So this is the difference between these two approaches, and the reason is just that here it gets assigned, or this function gets assigned to this variable at the runtime. So of course, although JavaScript is an interpreted language, but it has two phases. The first one is the parse phase, and the second one is the run phase. So every interpreter works in those two phases. And then this type of function, if you have, they are defined at the parse time. So of course they can, if you try to call them before their definition, then of course you can do that. But in this case, the function is assigned at the runtime, so, or the run phase. So that's why you cannot call it before getting it to assign. So that's the issue here. If you try to execute it, of course you will get some sort of error. For example, here I just try to do something like this, and then you will say error, undefined is not a function, because it cannot find it. But if you do the same here, there will be no problem. You will be able to call it. Of course there was no, if you want to check, you can just say something like console.log. So of course that's possible without any error. Again, if you want to check if a property is a function or not, why do we even need this thing? The reason is, if you go back to the previous slide, there is a property name, right? The value of that property is a string, so we are fine with that. But this property is a function, so how about checking whether this property is a function or not? So of course in that case we can use the type of operator and then can compare with the string function. And in that case, if it returns true, then that means the sum function is a function. So of course we can use the type of operator again here to figure out if this guy is function or just some other property or some other variable. So we can do something like that as well. Another interesting thing about JavaScript functions are, your function call does not require same number of parameters. So for example, this is your function definition, right? So you are saying some bunk and there are 4 parameters, A, B, C, D. Now you are passing arguments here, but these arguments are not as many as number of parameters here, but still you will be able to call this function, unlike in cases of Java and C++ where your function call has to match the function definition, or number of arguments have to match, even the type has to match. Here nobody cares. So of course you can call even without any arguments, or with same number of arguments, or even with the more number of arguments, you can do anything. And in each case this function will be called, and then you will be getting some assigned values onto this variable. So these arguments, let's see what do we have here. So you see, in first case, let's start with the blank one, or let's put one with more number of arguments, and let's see what happens. So in the first case, okay, so in the first case you didn't pass anything, right? In that case as well, you will be able to call this function. There will be no error, and it is perfectly fine in case of JavaScript. The only thing is, since you have not passed anything, all of these arguments or parameters will be initialized to undefined, and that's what you see there. So if you pass lesser number of arguments from here, then of course they will be assigned one by one starting from here, and then the last few ones, if you haven't passed that many number, then of course they will be assigned undefined, or they will be initialized as undefined. So something like this. In the case of 1, 2, 3, the D will be undefined, and if you pass equal number of arguments, then of course you will be having 1, 2, 3, or A, B, C, D. They will all be defined, and it will have some values. You can also pass more number of arguments like this. In that case, of course, your 5, 6, 7, 8, they are all neglected here. Only first 4 will be assigned to A, B, C, D, and that's it. So this is perfectly fine in case of JavaScript, and now you can think this will not even work or compile in all other languages. So this is one of the feature of JavaScript as well. You don't have to return anything, or you don't have to define return type of the function. Your parameters doesn't matter. The types, of course, doesn't matter. Now instead of 1, 2, you can also pass some sort of string or boolean or any object, doesn't matter. So ABCD will be initialized to whatever value passed from here. If you don't pass, then of course they will be initialized to undefined, something like this. Now there is another thing which is kind of getting deprecated right now, and I assume with ECMAScript 6 it will be completely removed. But as of now, there is one object available, or array available, inside every function, and it is called arguments. So it's a keyword, predefined keyword. So it's arguments, and it's an array, and it will have access to all the arguments that are being passed from the callee. So something like this. So in this case, although you are saying, well, I don't need any access or any parameters here, but still, if you call or pass some arguments, you can use the arguments object, which is an array, and again it's a keyword, and it is available inside every function. So here you can use this, and then you can access all these arguments that have been passed while calling this function. So if you try to print it now, you will of course you will have the array, and then the array will have all these objects or all these arguments that are being passed while calling this function. So again, you can access arguments even though if you have not put parameters in the definition. So that's perfectly possible as of now, but people don't recommend it. which is for good, because otherwise you kind of, I mean, it's not readable code. So down the line in the function you started using arguments, you may not know if this function's execution somewhere in the middle is depending on some argument. So the caller may not know what to do with that one. So of course, this is now getting deprecated. People don't like, or developers don't like to use it, and as I was saying, it may be removed from ECMAScript 6. So again, but nice to know that there is something like this as well. Again, right now here I'm just looping over the array because this is an array, right? So you can loop over that array and then see the individual argument from this entire array. So that's also possible. Okay, so let's talk about the variable scope now. So because we have gone through the functions, now it's important that we talk about the scope of the variables. In case of JavaScript, there are two levels of scope. That's it. One function level and other one is global level. That's it, nothing else. Now there is a huge difference between the way scope of the function level here versus anywhere in other language. So let's see what is that. So let's talk about the local variables, or which are also called the function level variable, function level scope, whatever you call it. Now what are those? So whenever you use var keyword inside the function to define a variable like this, then this variable, my name, is a local variable and it is accessible only in this showName function. If you try to access it from outside, you will get some error. And again, the key thing is you have to use var keyword. If you don't use it, then of course it will be created in the global namespace, and we will see what it can do or what else can it mess it up with your application. So again, use var keyword every time, even for the global variables, use var keyword. But here this is very important that you use var as long as you want to make it local or function level variable. In that case, if you try to execute this function, then of course my name is available inside the entire function, and then you can use it anywhere. If you try to access it outside, of course you will have undefined error. In the meantime, I have one fact. Okay, I thought I had one question. Anyways, so let's try with this one and see why we are getting some error, or what happens if we change something. So of course, even if I call it, then of course there's no issue in the call. You will get this check, but this call on 8 line number 8 will of course return an exception or some error. The reason being, this my name is not available outside this function scope. Since you have used var, so it is now local to this function only, and it can be used only inside function. Outside it is not even available, so of course it won't even print undefined. It will throw you some error, something like this. So this is your local variable. Now one important thing about the local variable as well, that there is no block level scope in JavaScript. So if you remember something from your Java experience or C experience or C++ or C#, whatever the strictly typed languages, so you will see, I mean, if you declare something inside the if block, so let's say you are using Java, so in some num, and then you declare it something like this. Of course this is JavaScript, so it is showing some error, but in case of Java, if you do something like that, you cannot use this num outside the block, right? Because Java and all other languages like C and C++, they have the block level scope as well. So but in case of JavaScript, this is no longer true. So let's have this example. Remember please, there is no block level scope in JavaScript. There are only two levels of scope, function and the global. That's it. So what happens to this variable in this case? So for example, what I'm doing here is I have the function showName, and then I'm just for making this demo work, I am using if or a block here, which is just nothing but an if block, and then I'm declaring one variable there. Now, as I said, there is no block level scope here in case of JavaScript. This my name is even available outside the block, because once you define it, they are actually defined for the whole function, even though if you are trying to make local to that particular block. It will never happen because JavaScript doesn't even have that level of that scope. So if you try to do, of course, you will be able to print Jack here as well. Of course, you have to call the function, right? So here you get the check, which is from the line number 8 here. And this is stupid because it's just going on to the curly braces. That's it, this information. Anyways, there is no block levels. Of course, you can use it outside as well, as long as you are inside function. So that's true. Again, always declare local variables using keyword var, or otherwise you are trying to create so many problems for your application. If your application goes big or grow into a big application, then you will be messing up with too many things. I will talk about that, but yeah, even in the global variable, if you try to declare something, which we will be seeing on the next slide, always use var. Don't declare anything without var, just to be sure. Don't declare anything without the keyword var. So let's talk about global variable then. Then in any variable, if you declare outside a function, then it becomes a global. And then of course it can be accessed in the entire HTML document or in the entire application, because if it is a global, it is attached to the window object. We just saw that, right? And if it is attached to the window object, that window is available to this, all the JavaScript files in this particular tab or loaded in this particular tab. So anybody can access that global variable. So if you want to put something in global, make sure that you understand that or understand the scope there, because that variable can be used or even overridden by any other JavaScript file inside this tab or inside this application. So make sure you understand this. And again, use var keyword, but just to be sure, or just to declare a global variable, put it outside any function. So that's what you have to do. That's it. Now, I think I already explained this. All global variables and even global functions are attached to the window object. So we saw example of my var or something. We just saw, I mean, it is attached to the window object, and you can also check, if you want to check whether this property is available on this object or not, you just have to put the property in keyword and the name of the object. In this case, what we are asking is my name is a property in window object? So of course it will return true if you just declare my name as the global variable. So that's true, because it will be attached to the window object as a property. Now, this is the thing, and that's why you should be avoiding without using var keyword if you try to declare a variable. So in this case, if a variable is initialized without declaring the var keyword, it is automatically added to the global scope. So in this case, for example, what you are doing, well, you thought, okay, I shouldn't use var for some reason, or you forgot to use var, then what would happen in this case? My name, whenever it is executed this line, since you are not using var keyword, my name will be defined in the global namespace. Now it will be available outside as well, something like here. So if you don't want to do that, then make sure, or be sure that always use var keyword. Something like this. Now, because you didn't use var, this my name is outside in the global context or declared there, so anybody can reference it. So something outside as well. Just how to avoid it? Just use var, and then any outside reference will return you in the error, which is fine if you want to restrict access to the outside world in this case. So yeah, if you don't declare using var, then it's going to be initialized in the global scope, and then it will be available to all the JavaScript files in this application, and it can mess up with anything else. For example, if another file is using my name for some reason, and then your my name will be changing here, it may change something other places as well. So you may not even debug this issue. So be sure that you use var keyword even for the global variables. Just declare them outside. If you want to be sure that you have to have local variable or the function level variable, use var keyword always. Again, why? Again, going with the or not. If you do not use var keyword here, you are trying to, or you are actually messing up with your global scope, or you are corrupting your global scope. That's not the best approach in any kind of application. You always want to tie your variables to something limited in the scope, so that you are not affecting all other executions. So here, for example, I have declared my name outside the globe, outside, so of course it is global. Now if I try to change here, I can change it, but if I don't know that there is some variable outside, and I forgot to use var here as well, so I was just trying to declare a new variable, but I forgot var. In this case, actually what you are doing, you are overriding or changing the value of the global variable here. So of course that's why once outside world or someone else, since it is a global, it has defined as Jack somewhere here, you forgot to use var, you just said okay, I will just define a new variable but with different value, then you are not actually defining a new variable or declaring a new variable. You are just assigning a new value to this global variable, since you have not used var keyword here. So again, once you execute this, your my name becomes bar, Jack bar. Anyways, so what about this case? What if we have the same name variable in the global, and then we are very sure, and then we have used var keyword, but again with the same name, and then we are using this? So are we changing something? Are we messing up with something? Well, no, you are fine here. So what would happen actually? What happened here? So let's see what happened here. So you have this global variable, right? Then you have declared a local variable. Why local? Because you are using var, so of course my name is local, but both the names are same, and of course the values are different. As long as you are using var and you want to use my name inside the same function, you will be getting the local reference. You will not be getting the outer reference, because you have declared a new variable in the local scope. Although it has the same name, but JavaScript can properly resolve this variable locally as well. So of course it won't, or you won't be able to access the outer variable here. So that is here. Now of course if you try to execute this function, you will be getting bar from this function execution or line number 7, but if you try to access my name from outside, then of course you are still having Jack saved there. So you are not messing up with your global namespace. What if inside you want to use my name again? Well, in that case what you can do is just use window.myname. So you see, because now you have specified, okay, I need the global variable which is outside and which is defined on the window object, because all the global variables are defined on the window object, or even global functions as well. So here you can still make a difference, or you can ask different reference to the variable depending on whether you are using window or not. If you don't, then JavaScript will refer you to the local variable here. So these are different things that you can use and you should be aware of. Question: what if you don't mention var inside the function? Will it throw an error since the name conflicts? Nope, there is nothing called conflict here in case of JavaScript. If you don't do that, you have messed up your outside function, your outside global variable. So now you have actually not defined anything new, you have changed the value of that outside function to bar. So here as well it will be now bar. Again, there is no conflict in case of JavaScript. Something like if you have var my name and you say okay Jack for some reason, and then you declare new variable with the same name and probably assign some other value, no error in case of JavaScript. You will of course get the latest value. And why it is happening? Well, I have answer for that one as well after the next slide. So any doubt until here in the variable scope, or understanding difference between two important scopes, the function level or the local and the global? So a few important points from these 2 or 3 slides. First, you have to use var keyword. There is nothing called block level scope in JavaScript. So if you are trying to see something like this, it will not behave just like Java or C++, because there is no block level scope. Always use var even for the global. or global variables if you try to define. And then these are different cases where you will be messing up with your global namespace. Or what would happen if there are same variable but properly declared but with the same name. In that case, inside the function you will be getting a reference to the local variable, and outside the function you will be getting the reference to the global in this case. So yep, why we have this issue, or why aren't we seeing any error here? Just like in any other language you would see something like, well, this is already declared or something like that. Here nothing of that sort, and the reason is hoisting. Spelling is Hoisting, not hosting. It's hoisting. Hoisting means just lifting the variable, just lifting something. Now talk about here. So we have this function. Whenever I call it, what should it do? Or what should it print actually? So what I'm doing is I'm declaring the variable here and then also initializing it to bar at this line or here. But I am using the variable value before even declaring or defining or initializing it. So what do you think? What should be the printing here? What should it print here? Any suggestions or guesses? Not suggestions. If I try to call it now, what should it print? So yep, I have few answers, few wrong, few correct. So of course it will print undefined, and it will not throw you some exception. It will not print bar. So it will print undefined, and the reason is hoisting. So what happens in case of JavaScript? I mean, this is the feature of the language. It has nothing to do with your development or something. It is the feature of the language. So what happens in case of JavaScript? All the variable declaration, and please remember, declarations, not the initializations or assignments, just the declarations are hoisted, means lifted or declared to the top of the function. So in this case, this is a local variable, right? This guy. So I'm saying just the declaration. It is moved to the top of the function in this case. If it was a global variable, then it would have been moved to the top of the global context. So in that case, it is, or the equivalent of this would be something like this. Or that's how JavaScript will treat this entire declaration and initialization, because it involves something called hoisting, which is lifting the variable declaration. So what it would do actually, if you write something like this, your actual code or JavaScript will or JavaScript will be handling it like this. So it will lift the variable declaration to the top of the scope. In this case, let's say first line. It will take all the variables declaration from within the body of the function and then put them at the top. And now in this case, it looks clear why it is printing undefined, because now because at this time these are just the declaration, that's it. And then if you try to print something, it is undefined, of course, because it is not initialized. It is still being initialized at the same line after the console.log, right? So that's why your initializations are not hoisted, otherwise your entire application will be messed up. Only the variable declarations are the ones which are hoisted on the top of the function if they are local. If they are global, then of course they will be moved to the top of the global context. So that's why you can use variable even before declaring, and it will not throw some error, something kind of reference error. And this is the reason why 2-3 different things that we saw in the previous case are true. For example, why the global function, where was it? Here, like this was not returning an error, but this was returning an error. We'll see all this now. But before that, let's consider where was this? Why this was also working. Well, the reason is when you declare 2 global variables, what happened actually? So JavaScript will look at this code and will say, okay, so it will take my name or not. out from here, declare at the top of the global scope, so somewhere there, and then of course there will be just the assignments now on. So now your declaration is one time, you are assigning something, and you have overridden that thing again. So of course at the last you will be having the latest value, which is whatever ATFS or ATVF. So that's why it is like this. Now let's come back to the previous problem, or regarding that function call. Where was it? Here. So this works properly because of course there is no hosting for the global functions. What about this one? And why we are having error in this case? Something like this. And you are having error because this is a variable actually. This is different thing that you are applying, or you are assigning a function to the variable, because in JavaScript your variable can accept function references as well. Now what is actually happening here is JavaScript will host this guy like this, and then it will be something like this. Now what is happening is at this time the variable is undefined, and now you are trying to call a function like thing on the undefined, which is of course this error. Well, that's why there is an error, because this is undefined and you are trying to make it like a function and call it, which will not happen. It will be available for as a function only after this line. So if you try to do same thing here, of course you will be able to do that. Well, as long as you don't do this, because your JavaScript is breaking at this point. So here of course that's possible. How to know if something has been written? Just print something like this, and then you will be able to execute it. The reason is of course the hosting. So yep, that is the reason why it was working, or why all of the cases regarding the scoping as well. And this is very important for interviews as well as your overall understanding about JavaScript. There are only few different things in case of JavaScript, but those are very important. If you don't understand this concept, then of course, and that's why this is world's most misunderstood programming language. You don't know the basics and you just go and work with libraries, and you don't know what's happening behind the scenes in those libraries, and you come back to JavaScript someday and then something weird is happening because you are coming from some Java background or C background, and everything looked messed up to you, which is not correct. It is not the problem with JavaScript, it's problem with the understanding of the developer. So again, awesome language, but misunderstood. So this is the way, or this is the reason why we are having, or this is still working and not returning an error, because the variable declarations are hosted. Now let's take another example. What about the function declaration? And if they are used just like variables? I think I already showed the example. Let's see this one as well. So you have the show name here, right? And then you define something like this as well. What about this one? Let's see the example here actually. So what you did actually, you declared the variable, right, with the show name, and now you declared the same function, some function with the same name, show name, and then after that you are trying to say, okay, what is the type of show name? In this case, of course, it is a function, because the function definition has overridden this one. And ultimately the reason is somewhat kind of this, because if you try to print window here, which is a global object in this context, then you will see, since all this will be properties on your, what happened to it? Okay, all this will be properties, right, on your window object, show name. So ultimately when you do that, this is being added as a property on your window object, and then suddenly you change from variable to the function. In that case, now your show name is now a function, something like that. So that's why you are having it as a function here at this line and not the variable. As soon as you do something like show name equals to something else, now it's no longer a function, now it's a string. The reason is, stupid. The reason is Now you have overridden that property again with some string value, which is perfectly fine. So again, the same name, 3 different behaviors, just because the order is something else in this case. So now you are having string. All magic. Well, nothing is magic. Just the way hosting and all different things in JavaScript works. Any doubt regarding hosting? Important thing actually to understand. Okay, let's have this small quiz. I have 2 cases. Let's take one by one. So I have how many prints? How many console.log? 2, right? Now tell me what would be the value, or what would it print at both the places. So of course it will print this first, and then of course this is second print statement here. Now again, this is just a showName function looping over something which is nothing, empty for loop. Then I'm logging the value of I, and I'm logging the value of I again here. So what do you think? What should it print at this line, and what should it print at this line? Okay, this console.log is outside this for loop. Okay, so of course there is only one statement here. Think more. We just went through all the concepts in last five, 6 slides only. It's nothing new. I'm not asking anything new here. Okay, too many guesses, and I think no one is correct. And the reason is, well, of course it will print error, and before that 10 and error. Why? Let's go through the basics again. We have this function. Now we are declaring the variable I. So we thought probably this I is only available here, but again, there is no block concept or block level scoping in JavaScript. So this I guy is available in this entire function. Now since you are using var, so of course it is a local. So of course this I doesn't exist outside this function. So that's why you are getting error here, which is fine. Why we are getting 10? Well, this is while loop, right? The last value at this I++ would be what? 10. So that's why it is printing 10 here and then error here. There is nothing called invalid. So there is one answer saying second one is invalid. So it's not invalid, it's just throwing you error. So again, if you try to see again, 10 and I is not defined, because you are trying to use I in the global context here, but since you were using var, it was a local variable. What is the second one? Same thing, except removing this var. Now what? Okay, so now you will get 10 at both the places, because since you are not using var, this I is now in the global context, or declared in the global context implicitly or automatically by JavaScript, because you forgot to use var, and now you have looped it 10 times. So value at the end would be of course 10. You print 10 here, and then since it is now in the global context, it is accessible outside as well, and that's why you're seeing 10 there as well. So just basic things. If you use var, then of course it's an error, which is good in my sense, because I don't want this I to be accessible outside in this particular case. So good enough. Any doubt or any question? Okay, so let's have a break for 10 minutes, and of course this class will go at or until 9 o'clock, so bear with me. If you have any appointment or anything after 8:30, you can leave your class, and of course you can watch the video later on. But still, just making sure that you know that this class will go until 9. 1 more hour. Let's have 10 minutes of break right now, and then you can go through these slides again, and then also some examples. If you try to do, you can just copy paste into your Plunker. They are all executable, and you will see something. And if you have any question, let me know. Okay, so let's start talking about JavaScript again. So there are many pitfalls that a normal JavaScript developer can go. I mean, most of you have already seen. What if you don't use war keyword? Shouldn't there be some sort of error to us or error in console just to make sure that developers are not working or they are not doing something wrong? So just to have that, there is something called strict mode, and I think it appeared in the second last version of ECMAScript. So you can put your script into strict mode just by using some string, using one specific keyword on top of your file or inside your functions, your JavaScript functions actually. And then of course, in that case, for all these normal blunders that a developer can make while developing or while coding, they can be handled. So instead of silently failing or silently just avoiding something, for example, if you don't use war keyword, then probably you may be messing up with the global scope. You want to have some sort of error in that case, that saying, okay, you should always use war keyword. So at least your developer would know, okay, I did some mistake there. So for that, you can put your script or in your function, anything can be in the strict mode of the JavaScript. So again, you can always place a program or function in a strict mode or a strict operating context, because using that it can catch some common coding bloopers and it will throw exceptions instead of failing silently. So it will throw errors in unsafe conditions or actions like accessing global object without var, something like that, or declaring a variable without var, those kind of things. Or if you are trying to use or access deprecated functions, so it will throw in that case as well. So what you have to use actually just this string or just this keyword, use strict, at the top of your file. That's it, or your JavaScript file, and then this entire script that you are writing below that is in the strict mode. And now if you try to mess up something like this, not using var or something else, that examples are here, instead of failing silently, now your JavaScript will throw you some exceptions. So either you can use the use strict at the top, or if you don't want to put your entire script in the strict mode, you just want to put some function into the strict mode, you can write your use strict in the first line of the function as well, and then your function only will be in the strict mode. Everything else outside this function will again be having the same issues with the normal JavaScript execution. So the keyword here is the use space strict, and of course it's a string column. That's it, and it will enable strict mode for the entire JavaScript. If you place it in the global context, or if you put inside some function, then only that function will be in the strict mode. Now what are the different errors that it can check? So first of all, just have something like this, all this. So now instead of saying, well, I is properly defined, it's saying I is not defined, and the reason is you are using strict mode. If you don't use it, everything is fine, right? You just have 10 there. So that's one benefit of using strict, and even your plunker is now giving you some errors or warnings, because since you are using strict mode, now this is not valid anymore. So this is one safe thing if you want to avoid some of the bloopers that you can do or use while coding. So just make sure that your script is in the strict mode. A few things at least will be easier for you. What are the other errors that it can catch? So of course, for example, you have one variable and one function, right? And if you are trying to use delete keyword or delete operator on those variable or functions, they are not legal. So of course it will throw you some error in this case. If you don't use strict mode, they will not do anything. They will fail silently without doing anything, but at least you should know that this is not valid. So that's why if you use strict mode, they will return you error. So where you can use delete, since we are talking about delete here. So let's go back, keep your script in the strict mode, and just have this just to show what kind of error you can get. So you will see something like delete of an unqualified identifier in strict mode. So that's not valid, illegal. That's illegal. So where you can use delete? Well, the best thing that you can use delete is for deleting property on an object. So something like you have one object, you have name, property here, and you have some other thing as well, like this. For some purpose, you want to delete the name property entirely from this object. So if you try to print console dot or obj now, so you will be getting what? This object, right? Age and name. You want somewhere in your code you want to get rid of the name property, for example, so you can use delete on that one. Something like delete obj dot name. And now if you take it, then of course you won't be having name property, it's deleted. So that's legal. But deleting the variable and functions which are global in nature, nope, not allowed. What about in this case? So here what you are doing is by mistake, or I don't know, deliberately, you are using the same keys in the literal, right? So which is also not legal. So that's why you are having an error since you are in the strict mode, because there is no meaning of using the same keys twice in the same object. So of course that's an error. If you attempt to override the arguments object, we saw this argument array, right? Which is available inside the function. Now if you try to override that, means you are trying to assign something of your own to that arguments object or array. I mean, that's an error, solid error. So that's why you can restrict, or you can catch that exception as well. What if your arguments name or parameter names are same in the function, like arg1, arg1, something like this? Then of course this is an error. So you can handle that exception as well. So not many other. So you can just use strict mode always in your scripts, and that should help you to catch all these common mistakes. Any doubt regarding the strict mode? Most of the plugins that you have, or all of the libraries, when they are developed in the strict mode, because they just don't want to get problems with all these different things or different issues or some common issues in JavaScript. So you will, if you see their source code, they will always be in the strict mode. Okay. So far we have talked about functions, hoisting, and scope. Three important things, right? Now let's talk about another important thing in JavaScript, and which is called closures. So what are closures? So again, you have to remember and you have to go through this topic very thoroughly. This is closure. I mean, usually questions are direct, like what is JavaScript hoisting, or what is JavaScript closure, what is closures in JavaScript, whatever. So closures, well, they are nothing but some inner functions. That's it. So this inner function can access outer functions variables. So what is we are talking about here? So of course you have this outer function, something called show name, and you have two arguments there, first name, last name. You have one local variable, you have used var, so that's why it's local, name intro, some string value assigned to it. Now inside that you are having a nested function. So again, closure is inner function, so nested function, whatever you call it. So it's a function inside function, right? So this make full name is a function, but again inside function. So that's possible in JavaScript. And then here you are using name intro, which is defined outside this function, outside the closure. And you can also access the first name and the last name, which are arguments of the outside function. That's perfectly possible here with the inner functions or closures or whatever you call it, or nested functions here. So this make full name, of course. Now at the end what you are doing is return, and you are making a call to make full name here. Since you are using these braces, that means you are making a call to this inner function. In that case, it will be returning you this concatenation of the string, which is your name, and then whatever you pass from outside. So this is your function definition for show name. Now you are calling this show name, and you are saying Michael Jackson. So first name is Michael, last name is Jackson, and then ultimately this variable will be initialized, this function will be defined, and at the end call to show name is doing, or is making sure that it's calling make full name, which is inner function, which will just return you one string, something like your name is Michael Jackson. So that's how your closures or inner functions or nested function, whatever you call it, it can have access to the local variable of the outer function or even the arguments of the outer function. So that's perfectly possible, and that's your closure. Now, but this feature, well, it is very important, can be confusing, and can be the reason for many of the errors as well. So we will talk about different cases of closures or different rules regarding closure that you have to keep in mind while working like this. So again, few things. Of course, your closure or the scope inside the closure or the closure function has access to its own scope. So if you declare something here, then of course you can access inside. Same with the other functions as well. It has access to the outer functions variable plus its parameters. Of course, as you have seen here, it can access the local variable of the outer function or the arguments of the outer function, so that's possible. Again, it will have access to the global variables as well because they are third in the line, right? First is the local for this function, the other one are the local of the parent function, and the third one are the global variables. So these three scopes are, or variable defined in these three different scopes are possible in case of closure. That was easy, right? Yeah. Now let's talk about some of the closure rules. So the first one, the inner function cannot call the outer function's argument object or arguments array, whatever you call it, because even an array is an object. Object is the highest definition or highest structure in case of JavaScript. Yeah, so inner functions cannot call the outer function's argument. So if I do something like, let's see this. I have this function, I can call it, and then why it's not printing anything? Okay, because I'm not using console.log anywhere. So now it prints properly. I have made a call to show name bypassing two parameters and works properly without any issue. Now if I try to use arguments here, I cannot access arguments of the outer function because every function has its own arguments array. So of course in this case I cannot access outer functions arguments array. So that's out of scope for the closure. The next one is interesting. The closure have access to the outer functions variable even after the outer function has returned. So this is important, and let's talk about this. So what is this function doing actually? You have show name, again some outer function. And now this time it is accepting just one parameter, one local variable, right? So your name is something like that. Now the inner function, it has, or you are defining it like this, and then you are asking for one more parameter for the inner function, and then it will return name intro, the first name which is outer functions argument, and then space, and then the inner function or make full names argument, something like this. Now this is okay until here, and then things are changing here. So here, instead of making a call to this make full name, you are returning a reference to make full name to the outside world. Why? Because in the previous case, in that normal example or the simpler example, you are making a call to make full name here only inside this function. So of course the reference was not going out from show name call because you were calling this function. So of course it was returning the result of this function, which is result this particular string in the previous case. Now in the current case, you are sending a reference, or you are returning a reference of this function to the outside world. So this is important actually. So we have something like this. You have show name, name intro, you have an inner function. Of course it has access to outer functions argument and the variable, and then you are asking for a parameter on the inner function as well. But instead of calling it here, you are returning a reference of this function to whoever has called show name. So since it is returning something from here, let's put that into some other variable. And pass something like here. So what you are doing here is you are making a call to showName, and what showName is doing, well, you are passing some first name here, so it went here, it is initialized, the function is defined, and then it has returned, or the showName function has now returned the reference to make full name, and it is done, right? And then when it comes here, of course, when it is executed, it will pass the reference of make full name, because that's what you return, to myfunc. So now myfunc is actually referring to make full name function here. So since it is referring to this function, you can make a call to that, right? Something like myfunc. And since it is now referring to a function, because you returned a reference to the function and passed on from here to here. So now this is a function, that's why you can use braces, just like calling a function. And then here, since you have access to this definition, you can pass some other parameter again, or the last name, value of the last name, something like this. Now since you are making a call, something like this, you can, without any problem, you can make a call and then it can return you the values like this. But now the problem is, you are just calling, or you are just passing the last name. What about these two values? Will this guy store these values from the previous call of the showName? Because these were initialized and available only in the previous call of the parent function. What about now? Because now this is a different execution. So the thing is, in case of JavaScript closures, they store references of these variables of the outside function even after your showName has returned, or the execution of showName is done, because they will still be stored in this function. So if I try to print this guy, you will get your name is Java. Of course, script you are passing to this local or the inner function of the closure. But where are you getting this your name and Java from? Well, because it is, or the closure can store references to the outer function's variable as well as arguments even after the outer function has returned. So your outer function execution was done here, but still you will return the reference to the inner function, which can have references to the outer function's variable and arguments, and it will store those references. So that's why when you run it, you are not getting something like undefined space script. You are getting your name is JavaScript or something like this. Of course, I mean, there is no requirement of space, but just saying. Any doubt in this rule, some kind of rule? An explanation is still here. So this is unique thing, right? Because there is no parallel to this in case of your Java. Well, the reason, of course, you cannot have functions inside function in Java. Although you can have nested classes. But yeah, that's a different thing. So here, the thing is, closure have access to the outer function's variable even after the outer function has returned. Means the execution of outer function is done, but still your closure will have access to its variable. We have just seen the example here. Now there is another thing with the same problem, or not the problem, same feature. Actually, closure store references to the outer function's variable and not the actual value. So if you have some way to alter these values from closure, in that case the values will be updated, because closure store references to the outer function's variables, not the actual values. So let's try and see this example, and let's see what we are doing. So when you don't need comments if I'm here. So what we are doing here is we have this function not accepting anything actually, and then we say, okay, define one local variable my ID 999, and then we are returning an object, right, this object. And now inside this object we are having two different functions. So we have defined getID, which is a function nothing but getter for this my ID. It will just return the reference of this my ID, and then another one is the set ID, which is kind of, or which is just used to change the value of my ID, right? And these two are inside these functions. Of course, they are kind of closures, and then of course you can get it. Now what would happen here? So you make a call to show ID, and then it will return this entire object, right? Which is an object having properties, but properties are having or assigned functions here. Both the cases, get ID, set ID. Now you get this entire object, and we have placed that object that you have received into obj. So now we are making a call to obj.getID, which is a function, so it will return my ID, right? Whatever, 999. Now if you change the value of, or you use the set ID, so what the set ID is doing, it will change the value to whatever you have supplied from this call. So now your my ID is 567. You have changed that value, right? And now if you try to get ID, you will get 567 and not the 999. Although your outer function has returned, the local or the closure has access to the reference to the variable of the outer function and not the initial value, which was just the 999. You can change it, and then of course you can get updated value. So something like, I have to print actually, console.log on the first one, and then console.log on the second one as well. So of course the first one gives you 999, that's the default one, and the second one gives you 567, because via this approach you have changed the value of the variable of the outer function, although outer function is no longer in the memory. But yeah, the function is no longer in the memory, but this the outer function is no longer in the memory, but yeah, this inner functions have reference to its object, which are in the memory right now. So that's interesting thing compared to any other language, because in case of normal Java or C or C++, whenever your outer function or any function returns, that is, the stack is popped, right? Or the stack is deleted. So all the local variables are also deleted. Here in case of JavaScript, if any closure is accessing the local variables, those local variables will stay in the memory. Although your stack is now gone for the outer function, but still those references are there, and then those variables are alive in the memory. So you can change them, you can get the updates, whatever. So that's very, very different than your normal languages. So again, any doubt in this case? So you understood the difference between this and this, right? Well, actually not the difference, but the second one, which is saying it shows the references and not the actual value or the initial value. So if you update the value again via this sort of method or some kind of this feature, then of course you will be getting updated value, not just the old value. So the reason is this stack is not deallocated. Well, stack is deallocated, but the values or the variables are not wiped out from the memory. They are still alive, and their references are being used here. Okay, and you can read all these comments. It's the same thing what I have been talking. Now, just because of the previous reason that your closure does have access to the references to the outer functions variable, your closure can behave in an unexpected way, and most of the times it will be hard to understand why it's failing. So let's see this example. So I have created an array funcs, which I will use to store functions. So of course your array can store anything, right? So what we are doing, we have created an array funcs, didn't put anything as of now. Now you are looping, right? Something like this, and then you're looping from 0 to 2 or total three times. What you're doing in this times is So what you are doing, so you are just pushing same function, but of course some different things in the console on that array. That's it. That's what you are doing. So you said, okay, on the 0, when I equal to 0, put this value in the array, right, which is just a function, and you are saying console.log my value is I, something like this. Loops again, go to I equal to 1. At that index you are putting another function, but this time it should say my value equals to the current value of I. Then you say 2, you do that again. So again you have initialized your funcs, which is having all different functions, because your console.log is printing something, current value of the I, or that's what you are doing. So now your for loop is done. You are out here, and then you are trying to call all these functions again, because you set them in the funcs array, right, one by one. Now you are calling again. So you created another loop, 0 to 2, and then you are getting a reference to each function at each index, and then you are making a call, right? So what do you expect the values here, or what should it do? So of course it will extract function from the funcs array one by one, and it will execute this line. So it should print 3 my value equals to some value. So what should you expect? What should it print now? Any ideas, guesses? Any blind guesses? So of course there will be 3 statements, because there are 3 functions, each having console.log. The only problem is this I, because this is string my value. So of course there will be something called my value and some value of the I. Now you don't know what would be the value of I. So of course there will be 3 statements with my value, my value, my value, and then respective value of the I. Yep. So as usual, as everybody may be thinking, it should print 0, 1, 2, right? Yes. Hell no, it is printing my value 3 at all the times. This is bummer. Let's do it again. So you expected it to print my value 0, my value 1, my value 2, but it is printing my value 3, my value 3, my value 3. Why is that? The reason is closure. This guy, you are assigning the functions at one time, right? So you have assigned all the function as values on each index of inside the array funcs. So now the funcs guy, if you try to access it now or log it, it will be an array of 3 functions. Now you are done with that work, you go outside and then you try to call those functions again. And just on the previous slide I mentioned your closures have access to the references of the variable of the outside world. So in this case, if you think about that, after the end of this for loop, value of the I would be 3, right? And since your closures, they have access to the exact reference of that variable. So if you try to execute after here, I has become at that time 3, because this for loop has executed, and that is why your I is now 3. And then when you try to print something like this, you are getting my value equals to 3 all the time, because again this closure has live access to I, and I's value right now is 3 at this line or any line after this. So this is the reason you are getting my value 3 or 3 times, because you have 3 functions. So array size is 3, whatever you call it. And even your plunker is saying don't make functions within a loop. The reason is this, and this is the common mistake that a developer can make. If you are defining your function at the time or inside a for loop in this case, and then you are executing those functions at a different time, and plus one more thing, you are accessing the values which may change here, In that case, you will always have updated references or updated values for those variables, even if you execute some later time. So this is common problem if you don't understand closure. So this is the issue. We'll see how to fix this issue, but as this time you understand the problem, right? Any doubt on this problem? Well, what is the doubt on the problem? The problem is there. Do you understand, or do you now know about this problem, right? And it can happen in this type of approach where you are assigning it at some other time, you are executing after some other time, so it can happen here. The similar way can happen in case of event handlers as well. So right now we haven't gone into event handlers, but in those cases as well, if you, because event handlers are defined when the JavaScript is executed, right? When those event handlers are being called in the real time. So they are called when user does something. For example, you have click event handler when you click on this button or something like that. In that case, that event handler will be called. If you are using such kind of references, well, in that case, the event handler will have the live or the current value of the I like this. We'll go through this again when we talk about event handlers, probably day after tomorrow. So any doubt here? Okay. So yeah, of course, this is a problem, or well, not the problem, that's how your closure behaves, because we just went through this rule here in the previous slide. We have better ways to handle this approach, and we will go through that. So how to handle it? Of course, this is the output, my value 333. We'll talk about how to handle it. So how to handle it? Well, that comes into IFE, which is immediately invoked function expression. Forget about everything now. Let's just consider about IFE or IFE or whatever you call it. It's very good. One of the best thing about JavaScript. So it is nothing but an anonymous function which will execute right after it is declared. So now you are thinking, well, it's an anonymous function, so how can we call it to make it execute, or to execute it, right? So this is the way you declare as well as execute your IFE. So what you're doing here is, well, you see all this thing. Let's break it down. You have this, right? Now what is this? So of course, from here to here, this is a function, normal function definition, right? You have defined, but of course anonymous function, so you are not naming it. So this is your anonymous function, just a normal definition. What you are doing is you are combining, or you are putting one parenthesis around it, and just after that you are making a call to the same function, although you don't have the name because you don't need the name in this case. So this is how you can do it. Of course you can do without this as well, just like this in this case, but yeah, it kind of will throw some warnings and something, so of course it's better to enclose it or wrap it in a parenthesis. So now yeah, if you want to execute it, well, you don't have to execute, this will execute without any call. So if we do something like hi, you don't have to call this function because you are making sure that it is executed just after it is defined and then wiped out of the memory, because once after it is executed, well, no one will have reference to this guy. So if you want to do some task like this, well, IFE is your friend in this case. So you say run, it is hi, so it is defined, it is executed, and it's wiped out of the memory. So you don't have any reference to this guy, because reference are only when you use the name of the functions. Right now it was an anonymous function, so of course there was no reference, nothing in the memory after its execution. So this is cool feature of JavaScript. Now why or when you should use, or before that even, if you want to do it with the normal approach, how can you do it? So if you want to do the same, then what you will be doing is you will be declaring some sort of function like this, or what you are doing, this is your anonymous function, you are assigning your function into some variable, and then just after that you are calling that function, right? So if you don't write this much, this is sufficient. This is the same thing what you are doing. You have assigned a reference to an anonymous function to foo, and you are making a call to foo. If you just replace foo via this thing in this guy, you get this. So that's why it's very concise, and at the same time it's same as this one, but you don't have to provide a reference. If you provide reference, then of course this reference is available in the memory as well, and there will be some memory. If you don't want it, then you can just have this, something like this. It will be executed right away after its declaration or definition, and then yep, there will be nothing in the memory, so you can have it. Now another feature of this IFE is it helps you to avoid messing up with your global namespace. How? Well, look here. So if you do something like this, so you will be declaring X variable here with the value hello in the global namespace, right? If there was some other X in some other JavaScript file, then of course you are messing up with that X. So that's what you are doing here. So this is in the global namespace. Just smaller example, but yeah, you may be altering another X somewhere else in your application, if that is also global. So this is the problem. You want to avoid it, then the only solution that you have is to wrap it in a function, but you want to call it again. So you can do something like function, some func, make it local to variable, and then call it, right? That's what you will be doing. But who has time to think about a name and then call just after that? What you can do instead of that, just use IFE. So what you will be doing is just get rid of the name. You don't need the name. Just wrap this function inside a parenthesis and just make it call there. Get rid of this as well. So yep, that's a good approach. And since you are inside a function, this X is local. Nobody else outside can reference this X. If you try to print X outside, it will throw you some error. X is not defined, so you are safe in that case. And of course you don't have to name it. There will nothing be in the memory after it is executed, so you are good. So this is IFE. So the feature of this IFE or this construct is, as soon as you declare it, it is defined and there is no reference here. What if you want to pass some value to this function? So let's say something like this. So what you can do is, okay, let me just be good with this one first. You have some func. What you want actually is, you want to call it, but this time by passing some value so that you can print it, like some func is not defined. Okay, this is the reason. Okay, pass X from here. So this is the, do it again. So you have this, nothing. You are just defining a function, some func, passing an argument and printing that argument. Now you have to do it just once for that matter, so of course you don't need to have some func here or the name here. What you can do is instead is just convert that into IFE. So remove the name, wrap the function around a parenthesis and just call it here only. But now you want to call it, right, via passing some value. So just pass values in here, and then yeah, you can get the same thing even with the IFE. So of course in that parenthesis that you use after the IFE, you can also pass some values from here and they will be handed over to the arguments inside function. That's what happened here. You pass one string with this garbage, whatever it is, and then it is being passed to X, just like in your normal function execution. The arguments are passed to the parameters, and now this parameters, of course it is local to the function, so it can be used here, and then entire thing is wiped out from the memory as soon as this function is executed. So that's a good thing. And since you no longer have reference to X in this case, nobody else can change the X now. because once it is executed, no reference to X, so which is good. And you can think of using this inside the problem that we had in the previous case with the closure. So we have IFE, and let's solve the problem of this reference and printing my value 333 by using IFE along with the closure. So that's how you can solve that issue. So again, the same thing, but instead what you are doing here is, so let's compare what we are doing in these two different approaches. So of course this was the approach, right? So we had, let me just stop executing it. So here we were just assigning function directly onto the function, funcs array, and then of course it was having a live reference to the I, and then since I was updated in the end, you were getting a reference to the I again. Now you want to solve this problem. What you can do is you can use IFE now in this part while defining it. So what you can do is here you can convert this into an IFE. So this function is ending here, right? And then here just pass I here from, pass I to it, and then here of course you can use X or X. Now what you are doing here is you have used IFE, and now you are passing arguments, which is I, from here. So what would happen now? This function will be executed. Well, actually you don't want to execute it right away. You want to store the reference into the function, right? So in that case, just have something like this, but instead of that, return something from the function, because you want to store it for the future. So you can have that, but let me just get rid of the comments. So you have this, but here you just return a function because you want to store that function into funcs array. If you don't do that, then you are just executing it right away. You will not be able to do it in the further. So let's have return a function, something like this from here, like this. Let's just be clear. So this is outer function, which is an IFE. What you are doing, you are immediately calling it, and since this X, whatever it is there, it is, and this is your inner function or the closure now. Now this X is not available after it is executed because that's wiped out from the memory. So of course in this case your X value will be persisted here in the funcs as well, and later on when you try to execute it, it will not be getting updated with the I. So that's how you can handle it. So that's the same code that I have here, and if you run it now, it will work properly. So my value is 0, 1, 2. That's what you wanted, right? But yeah, if you mess up with closure and you don't understand the concept of closure, then of course you won't be getting this result. You will be getting 333. So this is how you can use IFE here along with your closure to avoid that issue of using closure in the for loop. Again, your plunker doesn't understand that thing, so it's still showing you something. Don't make functions within the loop. Missing semicolon. Okay, just put semicolon. It's a return statement. So any problem understanding this IFE and how to solve that issue with the closure in IFE? So yep, an IFE is nothing but self-executing function or immediately invoked function expression. That's it. And of course it is anonymous, so you don't have reference to this in the memory after it is executed or after this line. No reference in the memory. Yeah, that's output that you will have, 0, 1, 2. Okay, so I'm gonna stop here today, and then tomorrow we will talk about this keyword inside functions, different ways of calling a function. So of course there are some other methods as well to call the function, not just use the parenthesis, and these are much more advanced way of calling functions. And interview question as well, apply and call. What is the difference between apply and call on the function? So we will go through that one, probably just half an hour at the start, and then we will start prototype inheritance, one of the most important concept in JavaScript. So tomorrow you will be having another heavy duty class, so be prepared for that one as well. We'll go through prototype inheritance, and that's it. that we'll be doing tomorrow, and then on the Friday we will talk about, or we will start talking about DOM manipulation via JavaScript. So we'll go through all these things, different timing methods that are available in the JavaScript that you can use, or some other methods, events, how to add event handlers, click event, mouse event, all these events, so many events, how to remove, because these are important concepts as well as far as DOM manipulation. So until tomorrow, where we will be covering prototype inheritance, it's kind of core JavaScript, just like you have core Java, right, or J2AC. So here as well, I would call it as a core JavaScript. You have to know core JavaScript, and then of course this is one of the usage of JavaScript, which is DOM manipulation and event handling and AJAX. So that's why we'll cover it in the day after tomorrow's session. So first we will go through event handlers, some important thing about event handlers, and then at the last AJAX. Okay, so that's it about today. I have one question regarding the project. Could you explain the auto assign property? Is it compulsory? Yep. So if you go to the last slide of the first introduction or first presentation, then, or second slide, or whatever it was. Yep. So there is one setting that I said, a Boolean parameter that you can save as a setting in the database, and owner can update that setting, and it is just auto assign. So usually by default you can make it true or false, I don't care. But if auto assign is enabled, in that case, whenever there are some events happening, for example, a reservation is created, and if auto assign is enabled, in that case what your system should be doing is, or your application should be doing, is it will assign the table automatically to that reservation after finding out whether the table is available for that particular time, for those many number of guests, those kind of things. So that's why auto assign is there. If it is enabled, of course, in that case your system should be assigning the table automatically when a reservation is created or something is updated in the reservation. So at that point, otherwise your owner should always be able to assign tables manually or override this auto assign thing. So for example, I mean, you just went to your restaurant without any reservation in before, or you had something, or some reservation has cancelled. So your owner should have ability to override any auto assign thing. So he should be able to assign the table whatever he wants. I mean, he's the owner of the restaurant, not your application. So of course, if auto assign is enabled, in that case your system should be able to assign the table to a new reservation automatically, and your normal or the manual ways will always be there. Is there any format for this in HTML, CSS? Can we just have checkbox for it now? So of course it will be checkbox. What do you want? I mean, true or false, that's it, right? And implement it during the backend. Yes, that's what we will be doing. Right now we will be having some page where you can make true or false for this auto assign. That's it. Any other question? Okay, so we covered good topics today. Go through these topics again. You already have slides on box.com, because if you don't go it and if you have some issues, you may never understand this thing again. So go through these topics, especially the functions, the hosting, closure, and IV, and these are very, very important topics to understand JavaScript. And as I said, this is the core JavaScript. Everything else is, of course, very easy. This is the hard part. And then, of course, class for tomorrow is also hard. That's it. These two classes are always hard. One with the closures and functions and scoping. The other one is the prototype inheritance. Because in these two classes, JavaScript is completely different than all of your programming languages so far that you have gone through for Java or C++ or something else. So that's why it's very important you revise this stuff again, probably tonight or before tomorrow's class, So, and be prepared for tomorrow's class again. Okay, if you have any question, ask me now, or we can meet at 6:30 Eastern tomorrow as well. And of course there is no match until Sunday, so the class will start on time actually. Yep, before you go, one quick announcement, and I will also post that thing onto the Slack. How many of you, okay, so the thing is, probably start of the next week, I'm gonna take backend sessions, and of course I will be having Java sessions because that's what I know. So Java backend, right? How many of you are interested in .NET backend? Because I have to ask my other trainer friend to, because I don't know anything about .NET, I'm stupid. So I have to ask him to give you the backend training on .NET. So I'm just gonna ask this question on this group, June 28th. How many of you are interested in .NET backend sessions? I will have to ask .NET trainer for your sessions. And I will be taking Java sessions. I will give you the timings. And of course this will be 2 days. So as of now there is only one for the .NET. Anyone else interested in .NET session? Okay, so the one guy who is that, Vinayak, you will be informed via eGen about your sessions. And everybody else, I mean, I will take Java sessions or Java backend session on the same timing, so you don't have to go anywhere on any other training. You can just be continuing in the same time period, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For the .NET, I mean, we will schedule something in just before this session or in the day, I don't know. So let me know if you are still interested in .NET. I mean, I can pass your information to the .NET trainer, so he will be able to assist you. And what I will be doing in the backend is, how many of you have any understanding of developing a RESTful API or RESTful web service? How many of you have used Maven dependency management? Okay. How many of you have heard something about Jersey and Jackson? So yeah, we will be implementing those things. So 2 days for Java backend, and then we will start with AngularJS, the last part of our training, or second last part of our training. Okay, I think we are with a good approach. On Friday we should be able to finish up with our JavaScript. The entire weekend we will cover jQuery, which is very easy library. It's not even language, but yeah, before that you have to understand JavaScript. So that's why we are covering JavaScript in 5 days. jQuery 2 days, 2 days of backend. So Monday, Tuesday you will be done with the backend, and then starting with the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday we will be doing AngularJS. Sunday would be your performance tuning of the web apps, as well as configuration and building your web apps, and automation, test automation on Sunday. And that should be the end of your training sessions on 20th of July. And you will get one more extra week to finish your project, last module, and return it to me. So work on your first module, which is due on 11th. Your next module will be due on 20th, and the last module will be due on 27th. So your next module will be your backend. So the training for the backend will be on Monday and Tuesday. So of course you will be designing database, everything, and writing backend code, Java code, or .NET guys will write .NET code, whatever. So that's it for today. Let's join tomorrow again 6:30, and thanks everyone for joining. Bye bye.